Hello, hello, and welcome to the Collins Cafe. I'm Andre Collins, your host for today, and we have a great show set up for today. This is the Staff Wellness Month edition. And folks, just let me tell you, mental health is no joke. And we have what we call the Client Experience Officer from Mental Health First Aid with us today, Tramaine El-Amin. She's already admitted to me off camera that she runs on chai tea. So we're similar because I run on black coffee only, but she's on chai tea. But let's welcome her to the show. Tramaine, how are you today?
Oh my goodness. I think I'm going to regret saying that, Andre. Thank you so much for having me. So excited to be here with you all and looking forward to the conversation. So thank you to you all for inviting us to be with you today.
Well, this is a really special conversation. So let's jump right in. Who is the National Council, and what do they do?
Thanks so much for that. The National Council is actually an organization that's been around for a while. While we are definitely at the forefront of leading the conversation in this country of what it means to take care of mental health and well being as a frame for that, when it comes to dealing with mental health challenges or substance use challenges, we want mental well being to be a reality for everyone. And so our focus is really on ensuring that from a public policy perspective, an advocacy perspective, as well as a public education perspective, our communities have what they need to address the mental health and well-being of those that are the most vulnerable in our communities. And so we do that by not only supplying our membership, which is about 3,500 providers of mental health and substance use treatment in the community. Those providers are provided our support to ensure that they're addressing the needs of their constituents, those that are coming to get services. We're giving them information and supporting them on the Hill. When it comes to advocacy and policy, but also supporting their workforce, ensuring they have the latest and greatest as it relates to evidence based practices. One of those things that we also do is something called mental health first aid, which I'm excited to talk to you a little bit more about. And what that means is we're providing a public education to the whole country, to the tune of almost 2.5 million people, or more than 2.5 million people today, that have been trained in mental health first aid. So, really excited to talk a little bit more about what we do and how we do it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a big network. So before we jump full fledged into the mental health first aid, so what's behind the rebrand? Why are we moving on from the words mental health to mental well being? What's behind that? What sparked that change?
I know that many of us have been in a very interesting place, right, over the last year. We have experienced something that's been what some call unprecedented, what some others call, a new normal. But this is an attendance to our mental well being that I've never seen in my lifetime, collectively, right? And so, because that language is becoming more and more um, accessible, because more people are willing to talk about something that they weren't willing to talk about before. We, even before that, entered into this process of who are we and what do we really do? And how do people know what that means? And so that rebrand had everything to do with we are not just attending to the mental health needs or just the substance use needs, but looking at people holistically. We believe that recovery is possible for everyone. And to that end, we want people to know that when we talk about well being, it has to be inclusive of mental health. There is no health without mental health, right? And so, a way to reflect that is to ensure that our name and our brand recognizes and is accessible by all, to know that we're really promoting the wellness of our communities and individuals, and ensuring that we also are doing so incorporating mental well-being and incorporating the addressing of substance use challenges across the country.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that, because when you talk about well being, it really does allow people to engage and explore that. It's not a scary word. Not that health is a scary word, but it's not such a scary word like health. So during World Mental Health Day, which was October 10th, we, the PAF, the Professional Athletes Foundation, we joined you in your hashtag Forward Together pledge. So, what's this pledge and what's the significance of it for our viewers that aren't aware?
Absolutely. We are so grateful that you joined that pledge and just joined your voice to so many across the country who are stepping up and stepping out and saying that, you know what, it's okay to not be okay. And we need to not just put the words out there, but put action behind those words. And we're moving forward together. And so we not only appreciate you all amplifying that message, but joining us and being willing to do, right? Not just saying that we need to address mental health and well-being, but making sure that we're taking action together. And that's because more than 264 million people are living with depression globally. So this is not something that affects just those people over there, if you will. This is about the fact that 1 in 5 of us in any given year will meet that criteria for a diagnosable mental health condition. And that means that we need to address that in some way. And one of the things that we want to do is get people to take action on something that they can do. And we gave a bunch of options for folks to do, whether that's just plugging in and getting to know what we do at the council as it relates to our practice areas, or being willing to check in with the people in your life and asking them some questions, knowing what resources are available at their fingertips, whether that be online or even within their organizations, and then taking that pledge to say, I am willing to go forward and actually action on what it means to address mental health in my community and well-being overall for myself and those that I hold dear.
Yeah, that's great. So I guess part of taking action, I guess, is what we did with you back in May. So we're really on this mental well-being train with you. So back in May, the collaboration between NATCO, the House of Athletes with Mishi Marshall, and the Mental Health First Aid certification. What a wonderful event. So when you do the mental health first aid certification, what does that mean? Does that mean I'm licensed and I can go out there and hang my shingle out and tell people to come see me because I can help get them right, or not? What does this mean?
How about no? How about no, Andre? So definitely, I love that. And no, you can't rent a cute couch. You can't go and just say, "Hey, tell me about your problems," and I'm going to charge some billable hours. Mental health first aid is really about making sure that someone knows what to do when there's an emergency, or when there is an opportunity to address even not an emergency situation as it relates to mental health or substance use. I think all of us want to act, right? If we see an accident on the side of the road, we want to do something. We want to engage in some way. And so we were so grateful that you all recognized that and partnered with us to bring this life saving information to your communities. And we're doing that across the country through our network of about 20,000 instructors who we train to recognize those signs and symptoms and teach others how to recognize those signs and symptoms that something's going on. We know how to do that if you think about it because of television. Even if we've never been trained in first aid or CPR, we know what the Heimlich maneuver is, right? We know where to go, we know what to do, and we know to call 911 if nothing else, right? So that's similar to what we're doing with mental health first aid. What we're saying to people is make sure you know what you see, what you could do, and how to be helpful and not harmful in providing that to support to someone, whether it be a crisis situation or a non-crisis situation.
Yeah, and that's really serious. If I could strike a serious chord right here to try and recognize when someone has a need, just being able to step in there and just do that little bit could be that turning point for them to better mental health or mental well-being. So how do I get certified? What are the benefits? What do I do to get this certification?
Absolutely. It just takes a day. And I hope that everybody can hear that. Just one day can change the course of someone's life forever. And that's dedicating one day to get trained, whether that be through your work, as you all are going to have an opportunity, which I'm excited about, or even in the community. One person could just sign up for a class. It's about a day long. And what they would do is be able to either virtually or in person participate in a course that teaches them something we call the algae action plan. It's a 5-step mnemonic that shows people how to go through the steps of supporting someone and do so to make sure that they're also taking them care of themselves. And so self-care is something that we really emphasize as well. That class might be free in their community, or it might be one that they have to pay a nominal fee for, but it is typically available in all 50 states. We are also in all the territories, and really excited that the program has taken off in the way that it has, because this information is necessary. One of the things that I think is also very interesting is the fact that, you know, before last year, there was this focus on mental health in the fringes, right? And the tide has turned. Most people are aware of the need, especially for ourselves and the young people in our lives, especially, to really address some of the challenges as it relates to mental health. We are teaching people how to recognize those signs and symptoms through that 5-step action plan, and then how to connect the dots for support to that person afterward. How do you connect them to resources? What resources are available? And then getting people comfortable with talking about some really difficult things through a skills building process. So it's not just about being aware, it's about how do I be aware and comfortable enough to go ahead and take action.
Yeah, and that's a nice segue. So are you prepared to walk us through the algae a little bit right now?
Sure, sure. I am always ready. And
Okay.
so definitely when it comes to mental health first aid. So as I mentioned, that 5-step mnemonic, it's called algae. Now that sounds totally like pond scum or the stuff you clean off the inside of your fish tank. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how do you remember? Just like CPR, it's those 3 letters, right? For those of us who've taken it recently, it's CBA. For those of us who are a little, seasoned, it's the ABCs of CPR, and it teaches you what to do when, right? It's that airway, breathing, circulation. One of the things that we teach is algae. A stands for assessing for risk of suicide or harm. L stands for listening non-judgmentally. G stands for giving reassurance and information. And the first E stands for encouraging help and encouraging professional help in an appropriate way. And the second E stands for encouraging help, but doing so from a self help standpoint. And so those 5 actions are taught and rehearsed and encouraged to those participants in the course, who are able to identify what they see and then action on what they should do as a result of what they see. When it comes to the A of algae, that assessment, it sounds like a little clinical when we use the word assess, but that's not at all what we're doing. We're helping people really see and identify what is it that I'm seeing clearly, not what assumptions I'm making, not what judgments I might be making, but what am I noticing about a change in behavior for that individual that's out of what I would typically see from that individual, right? And so in our homes, in our communities, we typically are around people all the time, especially in this virtual environment. Sometimes that might be hard to see, but it's noticing the small things before they become big things so we can action. And then it's listening. Listening non-judgmentally. And one of the things that I'm really good at, and I thought I was really good at, was listening. And then I got married 6 years ago. And so, what I've learned is that listening non judgmentally is a lot different than just listening, right? It's about suspending judgment, making sure that even though we see something and might not agree with it, we are willing to still support that person, hear what's really going on for them, and not necessarily look at it as, oh, I've been there, been there, done that, got the T-shirt, right? When it comes to some of the challenges some of our colleagues or our family members might be having, but it really is about having that empathy and that listening ear to say, you know what, that sounds difficult for you. That sounds like it sounds like you're in a tough place right now. Not and hearing what they're saying and showing that empathetic ear. Then, when we talk about giving reassuring information, we're talking about not saying everything's going to be okay. And typically we want to say that, right? But that's about us, right? It's about freeing ourselves of that guilt or the burden of not knowing what to do. We typically want to tell people, oh, everything's going to be fine. But we don't know that unless you're a fortune teller or, you do that futuristic kind of foretelling. That's great for you. But for me, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So it's important for us to pay attention to know that the information we give needs to be accurate, needs to be fact based, and needs to be reassuring in the sense that I can be here with you. And I may not understand everything, but that sounds like it's really challenging. And I'm here and empathetic, and I can be that listening ear. The next two things that we do when it comes to algae are encouraging help, but in two different ways, as I mentioned. The first is encouraging professional help. And Andre, that is not saying, oh, you need some help and you need some serious help, right? It's about saying, you know what? Maybe you might want to consider talking to someone about this and knowing who those someones are. It could be anyone from a psychologist or a psychiatrist, even down to a faith leader in the community or a family member or a coworker that has a better relationship than you might have, or more close relationship than you might have. So it's about encouraging professional help also. And so not recommending medication or saying that they should do a specific thing or action, but knowing how to frame that conversation so a person feels supported, and not necessarily judged. And so the last piece is really about encouraging self help and other support strategies. And that could be anything from reading, websites, apps that help to kind of address some of the nuances of maybe anxiety or depression, giving someone the tools to help themselves, and tools that resonate with them. For instance, for someone who's not into any kind of sport, probably don't want to recommend going to run if they're dealing with something that's stressful, but finding something that resonates. Throughout all of these things that are part of the algae action plan, what we find most often is that people are willing to get help if someone close to them recommends it. And the reason why it's important to know this algae action plan and how to use it is because there's a 10-year gap between the time that someone might experience a sign or symptom of something that's going on that's deeper and the time that they actually get help.
Hmm.
And with the median age of onset of any mental health challenge being 14 years old, that person could be 24 before they're even willing to go get help and to actually address the challenges, having missed all these milestones and that impact being significant for them. And so for mental health first aid, we train not only how to recognize those things with the algae action plan, but how to use it. And then also we focus on what is depression, what is anxiety, how do we change our language so that we're not saying things like, oh my goodness, the weather is so bipolar, right? But we're using the appropriate language so people who do need support, or maybe they are dealing with something, they're not they're not made to feel like something is wrong with them or negative just because of our language that we're not aware that we're using in their presence, right? And so self-care is a central part of what we also teach for that first aider, because as you prepare to support someone, and then go ahead when you support someone, there's some feelings there. There's some challenges there in how you deal with having dealt with a crisis, maybe at work, like a panic attack, or maybe you're dealing with a scenario where you're dealing with your own family member and some of the challenges of what they might be experiencing and not really being able to connect and understand. So knowing how to take care of yourself is the first priority. Knowing how to put on that, that mask like we do on planes before you support someone else is
Hmm.
part and parcel of what we teach.
Yeah, so the algae's well thought out. So how important is it to go in that sequence? And you don't want to fly through this in a few minutes, right? This
Right,
process
right.
could take days, right?
Yeah, it could take days. It could take a long time. It could take just that moment. One of the things we like to say is algae is a non-linear process. So you can glee, you can eagle, you can, lay, whatever way that you need to support that person. You don't have to do it in order. However, what's most important is that you always keep in mind your own safety and the safety of that person, making sure that you can provide support and don't step out of your comfort zone. If you are not comfortable, find somebody that is. Find somebody that maybe was already trained or has different skills in terms of dealing with these types of situations. The most important thing is that we do something, and maybe connecting that person is the best we can do. And that's okay. And so this is all not compulsory, it is completely voluntary. But at the same time, it makes you way more comfortable to deal with circumstances that we typically run away from.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice at the end there. Don't step outside of your comfort zone. You have to be comfortable when you're trying to help. And I would imagine listening is a very important part of this process.
Yeah, yeah, and don't forget that non-judgmental part, because a lot of times we listen, but we're listening so we can respond. We're
Mm,
listening so the person can finish the end of that sentence and you make your point. And a lot of times, what people are looking for, especially given the significant nature of all the things that people are experiencing around us, right? Social injustice, political impacts, the financial impacts across the board. There's so many things that people are juggling. And when we think about well being, it really is that full spectrum that recovery is possible, that hope and help is available, and that we can be empowered to support others.
yeah, that's fantastic. So, well-being, 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 well-being.
Yes.
So, as we wrap up, for the staff that's tuned in and listening, the PAF and DOPE. DOPE is actually our human resources department. So the PAF and DOPE have agreed to sponsor a mental health first aid training. So for the interested staff, please email us at paf@nflpa.com and then reference MHFA in the subject line, and we'll get back to you and get you signed up for our event. So this is fantastic, Tramaine. Your organization is doing such wonderful things. It's such an important topic, and we've really watched the interest in this area grow over the last few years, and certainly my hope, and I'm sure is your hope as well, that we start to talk about mental health as part of an everyday conversation. And when we need help, just go ahead and raise your hand and say, "Hey, somebody come check on me," because it's so important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for just inviting this conversation. It's just the more places and spaces we're willing to have this conversation, the bigger impact we can make and really move the needle and go forward together. So thank you for this.
Yep, you're welcome. And so thank you for joining us. You've been fantastic. This is the Staff Wellness Month edition of Collins Cafe, and we're signing off from Andre's basement in Arlington, Virginia. Thanks again.